María Luisa, una pregunta que tengas para nuestros compañeros en la mesa de la tertulia.
Bueno, uno de los temas que son recurrentes en las clases cuando yo enseño es encontrar esta conexión. Lo que decía Gama es que los estudiantes llegan con una perspectiva de voy a aprender sobre Frida y su relación tormentosa con Diego y quizá ya rompiendo el molde de su bisexualidad, ¿no? Pero no hay más allá, una visión más allá. Sin embargo, terminan el semestre haciendo esta conexión entre lo personal y lo universal. Y ven en Frida todas estas facetas, le hablan a todas estas comunidades y nos hablan a todos estos niveles. Para mí una pregunta que siempre ha sido interesante para mí tratar de contestar es ¿a qué nivel me habla Frida? ¿Por qué he disfrutado tanto enseñar sobre Frida y este México y este ambiente? ¿En dónde conecto con ella? Y creo que conecto de muchas formas. Me conecta con un pasado muy, muy querido, que es la relación con mis abuelos, su música, los paseos por el centro histórico, mis años universitarios y de prepa en Coyoacán y las complejidades de las relaciones afectivas que he tenido. Entonces, ¿qué conecta, qué los inspira a ustedes para o los llena de energía cuando trabajan con Frida Kahlo o sobre alguno de sus múltiples facetas?
Adelante, te escuchamos primero a ti, Gama.
María Luisa, para contestar esa pregunta, claro, es una pregunta un poco personal, ¿verdad? Para mí, cuando encontré o descubrí el trabajo de Frida Kahlo, ya era un estudiante de, ¿verdad?, de las ciencias naturales y de la medicina. Y luego, o sea, hablando de los lenguajes, no solamente es un artista que domina, vamos a decir, la palabra en el idioma español, pero también sabemos que dominaba el inglés, estuvo en París, alternando con grandes pensadores y artistas en Francia, o sea que probablemente también se manejaba en francés, en alemán, pero no solamente maneja el lenguaje de la palabra, pero también, por ejemplo, yo he visto la evidencia de que manejaba el lenguaje científico médico de la época. Entonces, ya por ahí hay un punto de abordaje a la obra, teniendo como punto de partida otro lenguaje. La anatomía desde el principio es algo muy importante, cuando ella pinta la pelvis, el hueso de la pelvis, las vértebras de la columna, que tienen una repercusión personal porque esas fueron las partes que fracturó durante el accidente terrible que tuvo a los 18, 19 años, pero luego además habla de unas casi torturas, ¿verdad?, a la que fue sometida como parte del tratamiento médico de la época. Me parece brevemente así otro momento muy interesante cuando escribe ese libro que Marina está trabajando, ¿verdad? Todos esos apuntes, ese diario personal, donde he encontrado en mi propia investigación que era una época que estuvo encamada mucho tiempo y sufrió de mucho dolor. Probablemente estaba adicta a los medicamentos de opiáceos, o sea, la morfina. Entonces, hay un elemento muy onírico y muy así aventurero durante esa época que está escribiendo el diario, donde a mí me parece que hay evidencia de que ella estaba muy afectada por estos medicamentos. O sea, desde el punto de vista, ¿verdad? Hablando de cómo se puede abordar el trabajo de Frida desde otro punto de partida del lenguaje, pues el campo médico es una cantera de recursos que ella plasma en su obra.
Adriana, ¿tú querías comentar algo?
Sí, en términos de lenguaje, bueno, voy a cambiar a inglés. In terms of language, I think it's important. I'll intervene here in two ways. I think we need to always remember, well, three ways. We need to always remember that we are looking as historians, whether we are sort of amateur historians or professionalized historians with training. All of us look at a historical figure named Frida Kahlo. And we need to think about the span of her life. To the point, Gama, that you just made, I think that the book that Marina is working on is very important. And I'll intervene here to say that we need to think historically about that as an object. So this leads me to think about the fact that not only did Frida Kahlo use oral language and written language in very dynamic and unusual ways for a woman of her upbringing at the time that she lived in Mexico, we need to always ask as a historian about the objects that we're interrogating. So the book in question, we call it un diario in Spanish. The word diario means daily. It's an object within which she appears to have written during about a decade of the last part of her life, when she was increasingly infirm and frail and ill and probably taking substances to ameliorate the pain. But that's not the same Frida Kahlo that we encounter in Detroit in 1932. Of course, there are elements of the human being that was Frida Kahlo that are always going to exist, but the conditions of our life change how we respond to things. So I try to think about that book as an object within which there is both written language and pictorial language. Frida Kahlo was many things, but she was first and foremost a visual artist with a very sophisticated understanding, not only of Mexican art. She was, after all, married to Diego Rivera. So the question of how she trained as an artist, well, we need to start there. That's not to put her as second to him. But if I lived with Diego Rivera and I were a visual artist, I would consider him a very useful teacher, right? And we know that she painted her tiny paintings as if she were painting a mural. So that object in question, the book, is an extraordinary source, but it is time bound to the last decade of her life when she was in the most acute pain. It's not the thing that I would necessarily use to interrogate a painting from 15 years prior. And what I find in both the scholarship on Frida Kahlo and certainly in the popular discourse is an ahistorical methodology. And that's deeply problematic, deeply problematic. So back to the book. In English, we call it a diary. That's very different than a diario, conceptually, and it's different than a journal. Most artists keep journals. So that object needs to be interrogated as a daily thing within which she poured out feelings, emotions, and thoughts. It also needs to be considered in the genre of the artist's journal, and it needs to be historicized to the period of her life in which she made it. And I think the same can be said for her letters. And then above all, we need to always remember that as an intellectual, and Kahlo was an intellectual's intellectual, right? She was a woman and she was very good at sort of subterfuge and redirecting, because she had to be in order to survive as a woman in Mexico of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, right? She had to play a game. And she was the master ocultadora in many, many ways, right? But she was first and foremost a visual artist. So what was her pictorial language? Well, she didn't vomit her biography onto her paintings. It does appear that Rivera in maybe 1931-32 suggested to her that she paint a painting representing the major events of her life. She said this in an interview, and that might have been the spark of invention. But she never translated her biography directly to her paintings. So the other language that Kahlo used was a deeply committed and informed political language. We are living deeply compromised and difficult times with the murder of George Floyd and countless other African Americans and people of color, including Latinos, within the prison industrial complex in the United States. The suspension of human rights, right? Kahlo and Rivera would have been incensed to be living in this moment in time. And we can look to her paintings, like My Dress Hangs There, which she began in New York and she finished in Mexico. That painting took her at least a year to make, and it's a combination of oil on masonite with collage. And the collage elements in the foreground are clipped from a newspaper that show people protesting oppression and poverty in the streets. We don't know what the newspaper source was, but she clipped tiny figures out of a black and white photograph in a newspaper, and she glued them to the surface of that painting. So that painting is not only, and probably at the very least, it's a reflection of her own bicultural discomfort between New York and Mexico. But to leave the interpretation there is a deep disservice to this intellectual. That painting is a political statement, and it is a miniature mural. And it's in conversation with Diego Rivera's Man at the Crossroads at Rockefeller Center. So when we study Frida Kahlo, we need to move away from biography because we'll always be pulled back there. But we need to say, what was her political language? What were her political concerns? What were her pictorial sources? She was always in conversation with artists of her time, with German artists, with Neue Sachlichkeit, New Objectivity, with Diego Rivera, with Cubism, with Surrealism. And that is what gets overlooked in the vast majority of the conversations about Frida Kahlo. So I'll stop there for the moment, but my question for everyone is, let's remember that this is an artist, that's the first way that she expresses herself. What is your favorite Frida Kahlo painting and why? Mine is My Dress Hangs There, because it is as powerful today in terms of the politics that we're living, rampant racial capitalism. When you look at that painting is an indictment of capitalism, right? So that's my favorite Frida Kahlo painting. So I'll stop there.
Gracias, Adriana, y gracias por traer a la conversación esta tragedia del asesinato de George Floyd. No podemos estar callados ante esto, porque si ayer en una clase que daba les pasaba a mis alumnos el documental de James Baldwin, los temas que él discute en los años 70 son los temas que discutimos ayer y discutiremos mañana. Pero bueno, ese cuadro que tiene estas columnas con un objeto de oro y un cruzado, son increíblemente, como dices tú, un microcosmos de su pensamiento y de crítica social. María Luisa, ¿querías tú contestar la pregunta de Adriana?
Sí, bueno, contesto la pregunta de Adriana, pero también quiero reafirmar esta idea de la importancia de la historia. Cuando yo empiezo las clases, efectivamente, todos los estudiantes tienen una gran curiosidad por la biografía y la vida de Frida como individuo, ¿no? Pero parte de lo que hago es justamente decirles, uno no puede entender ni relacionarse con el arte de Kahlo ni de Rivera si ustedes no entienden cuál es este contexto histórico y cuál es la perspectiva que viene y que le dio forma a la vida de Kahlo y al arte de Kahlo junto con todos los demás. Entonces, aunque efectivamente no estoy entrenada en historia, siempre he reconocido el valor de esa información, de tener esa referencia, y a los estudiantes les parece fascinante. Es una historia fascinante la de México en los primeros 50, bueno, siempre, pero esos 50 años son particularmente significativos porque si uno no entiende esa complejidad, uno no puede ver, y les digo, ¿no? El que no sabe, no ve. Si no sabemos lo que estaba pasando, es difícil apreciar ese arte en toda su complejidad y en esa conversación que hay continuamente con Frida, con los otros, con Diego, con su mamá, con las culturas originarias. Así que creo que todo eso nutre y es parte de lo que ustedes mencionan como lenguajes, ¿no? que incluye Frida en su arte. Para mí, mi pintura favorita tiene que ver con su autorretrato en la frontera. Yo nací, diferente de Adriana, yo nací en Baltimore, Maryland. Mi papá era investigador en Johns Hopkins y regresé a México cuando tenía 2 años y medio, crecí en México y a los 20 y tantos regresé acá y desde entonces he ido y venido, ido y venido. Y creo que ese cuadro representa en el sentido de estar en medio de diferente manera, que creo que esa idea de estar en medio, son diferentes medios para las diferentes personas, diferentes experiencias, pero creo que esa es mi pintura favorita, siempre recordando las cosas maravillosas y complejas de México y estando conscientes de que vivimos en un mundo muy complicado. Quiero agregar al reconocimiento de todas las tragedias que están pasando alrededor de las comunidades afroamericanas, no olvidar a las comunidades mexicanas en Estados Unidos. Lo que pasó en El Paso y lo que pasa en East Boston cuando dos mujeres van hablando español en la calle. Adriana empezó la conversación hablando de esta división entre lo blanco y lo negro acá, ¿no? Y creo que siempre hay que seguir metiendo esa perspectiva de la latinidad, que es un espectro, un rango de experiencias muy amplio, pero que tiene que ser parte de nuestras conversaciones.
Muchísimas gracias, María Luisa. Bueno, creo que la pregunta de Adriana es para todos. Laila, será interesante ver cuál dices tú, que es tu pintura favorita y por qué.
Creo que today I'm going to say that my favorite Kahlo painting is Mis Abuelos, Mis Padres y Yo, my grandparents, my parents, and I. And my choices of Kahlo paintings shift a lot because through doing the exhibition, I learned so much about individual works of art, but this was one of them that was very important. That, I was very curious about how she was constructing her paintings and using media differently. And so this is a painting that you might know from the collection of the Museum of Modern Art. We were fortunate to have it in the Frida Kahlo and Arte Popular exhibition. And Kahlo is represented as a toddler in this kind of bird's eye view of Casa Azul. Her parents are behind her, painted from photographs. Her interest and use of photographs, I think, is another kind of important question in terms of how she used different media and composed her works. On one side are her ancestors from her mother's Mexican side, and they're sort of above a Mexican landscape. And on the other, her father's German parents, so her grandparents, are represented above the ocean to sort of show his transatlantic journey. So some of the themes are actually similar to the issues that Maria Luisa was discussing in relation to sort of histories from different parts of the world coming together. I think this painting also, not unlike My Dress Hangs There, has such a forceful political undertone that is very important to me, where she represented this at a time when other German families in Mexico were doing the exact opposite, making genealogical charts to show that they had not intermarried with Mexican people. And she is like very brazenly like putting that history to be sort of publicly seen. In relation to the influences of muralism, I think this is a great one to think about as well, because the figures sort of fill the frame of the painting, which is really only this big. And like many of her works that were inspired by Arte Popular, this one was created on a zinc panel, or like a metallic panel, to reference the ex voto or retablo tradition, which I would say is probably one of her strongest artistic influences. Because we tried to look very closely again at how she made her paintings, we got some conservators to look at these works with us. And this was one of two paintings where we noticed that she had actually scratched away the surface after she had painted it to reveal metal below. So the next time you go to MoMA and you see this painting, if you look at the lace that is on the mother's cuff, you can actually see where she scraped it away to make a sort of lace pattern. I love so much this acknowledgement of different materials. That is something that I almost never see written about in works on Kahlo. And here we have this wonderful collapsing, I think, of her uses of photography, of surrealist kind of perspectives in her painting, as well as a true engagement with the material itself. So for today, this is my favorite, but if you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer.
Very good. Gamma, what's your favorite Frida today?
Yes, I like this emphasis on today because I do believe that our notions of objects and also the career or body of work of artists changes with time, and that can be on the personal level, but also at the institutional level, at the sort of historical level. And my favorite work today is La Venadita, or The Wounded Deer. And this, I think, draws me back to certain references that I think are present in her work to religious painting. And in this particular piece, I do believe that there is a connection with European painting, religious European painting. And for me personally, at this moment, this painting embodies the vulnerable. And sort of like, it's not a depiction of the vulnerable in our society to draw pity from, but actually it's sort of like a visual receipt. It is the embodiment of a reality that it's confronting us. And to me, this Wounded Deer, in a way, is Mr. George Floyd. And I mean, it's emotional. And so that is the work that it's speaking to me right now, very, very powerfully, about also the moment that we are dealing with. We're faced with the collapse of a system. We are faced with inevitable confrontation of cracks of a system that we have all participated in sort of like putting together, and that is no longer working. And it's a call for us to become active, become involved, become engaged. And that can be from just a personal sort of solidarity level to action. And so that's really the work that it's talking to me really strongly now.
Muchísimas gracias, Gama. Art is about emotion. Marina, ¿tú qué nos dirías que es tu Frida favorito el día de hoy?
No sé si sea mi favorita, pero me gustaría traer a la conversación, justamente hablando de violencia racial y de género, unos cuantos piquetitos. Es una de sus pinturas más fuertes, que nos deja ver como una viñeta de la vida normal, en donde la violencia es totalmente normalizada, ¿no? Donde no hay consecuencia, donde no hay remordimiento, donde vemos una violencia sexual y física que se ha venido sistematizando y que es vigente hoy en día. Me llama mucho la atención de esa pintura como pues el humor dentro de esa misma, como ese sentido del humor. También se conecta un poco con la nota roja mexicana, ¿no? Que podría ser como una fotografía de estos periódicos de la alarma. Pues nada, eso como que lo quería poner sobre la mesa.
Bueno, voy a platicarles yo cuál es el mío. Y eso tiene que ver con que yo soy el único en esta reunión que ya había nacido cuando seguía viva Frida Kahlo, y que en la casa mis padres tenían varios libros de arte, y había una imagen de Frida que me llamaba particularmente la atención, y es Lo que el agua me dio. Y yo no entendía qué era eso. Para mí la torre latinoamericana era el orgullo de un México moderno, estaba cerca de la farmacia de mi papá, cerca de Bellas Artes, y que hacía en medio de un volcán, que también podía en aquella época ver. Y también era la época en que cuando yo viajaba con mi familia en coche a San Antonio, llegaba a algún hotel y había baños para hombres, para mujeres, para negros y mexicanos. Y yo le decía con mucha naturalidad a mi papá, entonces a nosotros nos toca ir a este. Era una cuestión más bien económica y social que racial. Pero esa idea de que la imagen de la modernidad cosmopolita iba a terminar en el volcán, nos habla de una crítica a quienes construyeron esos rascacielos y cómo esa verdadera prosperidad no puede ser, no puede seguir siendo algo que nada más toque a un grupo privilegiado por educación, por raza o por herencia. Y lamentablemente, como en los escritos brillantes de James Baldwin, seguimos discutiendo esos temas el día de hoy. Pero antes de pasar a nuestro brindis final, y para no abusar de su tiempo, quisiera pedirle a Raquel Tadeo que también nos hiciera una última pregunta para alguien. Tenemos poco tiempo.
Hello, I'm Raquel Tadeo. I'm a student at Boston University, and then I'm also working currently with UNAM Boston. I recently started learning about Frida Kahlo. I know she's been a super iconic artist, but I haven't really dissected her artwork or her life or even her story up until like the past year. I began to familiarize myself, essentially with the class that I had with Benjamin. That was a topic of our discussion. What I was really interested was her self-portraits, and I was actually going to bring up The Wounded Deer because that is also the one that mostly kind of stuck out to me. But I guess just self-portraits standing alone, I wanted to ask you guys which one do you think kind of just represented like a portrait, like a mirror image of her, and kind of like reflected her expressions the most. I guess that's a question for everyone.
Would you like to answer that, Adriana?
Sure. Raquel, it's a pleasure to meet you, and it's a wonderful question. So I think, something that we can observe is that self-portraiture was so important. It was really the genre that Frida Kahlo most practiced, but the format changes, right? And so we've spoken today about My Dress Hangs There, Self-Portrait on the Borderline, my grandparents, my parents and I. Those are all early paintings. And we can notice that in that format from the 1930s, they're multi-figural compositions and they're full figures. I mean, they're tiny, right? Almost all of Frida Kahlo paintings are tiny. But in the late 1930s and in the 40s, she begins to shift her format. We begin to encounter her alone in her paintings. The Broken Column, Las Dos Fridas, the Extraordinary Series. We're all here on Zoom, so we are a Frida Kahlo self-portrait, right? One of her standard formats is, for example, Thorn Necklace with Dead Hummingbird. And I think part of what we're seeing there is, again, remembering that this is a visual artist. She expressed herself in many different ways, through language, through writing, an incredible epistolary record. She even took some photographs, now we know. She expressed herself in dress, right? There are accounts that sometimes she spent more time dressing herself than she ever did painting, right? So dress was another form of creativity. She was not a Tehuana. She was not indígena. She was a mestiza. She was half German, right? So she was even a complicated version of a mestiza. So I think, Raquel, that's a wonderful question because her genre was self-portraiture, but within that one genre, she wrote an entire history of art, right? The Wounded Deer is a beautiful painting, and Gama, I love the way that you described that and tied it to the pathos of the moment that we're living. But I just want to remind another painting that comes towards the end of her life in 1949 is The Love Embrace of the Universe, where she shows a metaphysical figure in the background that is both sort of blue-green and earthy brown, and then she shows what appears to be an African woman with dreadlock hair. And then her arms are green and brown. And then there's Frida in her Tehuana costume holding Diego the baby, and Señor Xolotl is there. So again, she comes full circle. She starts off with these mostly compositions in the early 30s that are full figure, she with Diego, she with New York, she with Detroit. Then she spends this period in the sort of mid-40s doing the 3/4 pose format, Thorn Necklace with Dead Hummingbird, The Broken Column. And then at the end, she goes back to these deeply politicized paintings, The Birth of Moses, Love Embrace of the Universe. So I think that's another really productive way to enter into Frida Kahlo, is not just to look for Kahlo, like find Waldo, right? But to look at the compositional structure and say, what is she what are the choices that she's making within the genre of self-portraiture? And how can I begin to ask questions based on the choices about compositional format and structure? And then, of course, iconography and history and all of that.
Thank you so much, Adriana. That was wonderful. Maria Lisa, you want to make a comment? We hear you.
No, I think that that painting, Love Embrace of the Universe, represents or compiles all the themes that Frida was most interested in, right? Yeah, you have nature, you have love, you have pain, you have motherhood, you have life and death. You can think about the pyramid structure, duality, mestizaje. So I think that painting combines and brings together all these themes in a really masterful way. And it's a entry point to start discussing all these themes that were so important for her, and speaks to her complexity and awareness of the world she was living in, internal and externally.
Well, this has been a wonderful tertulia. Thank you so much. And now it's the time for each one to do a brief toast, un brindis rápido sobre lo que ustedes quieran brindar, quizás con una taza de café o con una copa imaginaria a esta hora de la mañana. Empezamos con Laila.
Muchas gracias a todos. I just want to raise my cup to working together, especially through these difficult times.
Quiero hacer un brindis por todas las artistas jóvenes en México, en Estados Unidos, Latinx, para que estos tiempos inspiren su creatividad y su fuerza.
Salud.
No sé si quiero usar la palabra brindis, pero porque como que no encuentro que eso sea como que un momento celebratorio en el momento de la historia en que estamos. Pero sí, lo que quise decir es que me siento muy afortunado y también humilde por tener la oportunidad de, aún incluso con todas esas dificultades, continuar pasando la antorcha de nuestro amor e interés por la cultura. Y creo que en este momento difícil, donde hay como una tempestad que puede apagar ese fuego, es importante proteger ese fuego y pasar esa antorcha. Y creo que actividades como esta propician esa continuidad. Y bueno, pues brindo por el esfuerzo y por el valor de todos aquellos que estamos haciendo eso.
Por Frida y por todo este frente de mujeres que estamos y seguimos en la lucha de cambiar las narrativas de género, cambiar la victimización hacia todas las cosas positivas que hemos aportado las mujeres.
Salud. Adriana, por favor.
Well, I think everyone has already been so eloquent, but I think, I'd like to raise a glass to art in general, because it is a way of, an otherworldly way of processing the life we live and the times that we live. And I think that 40 years from now, we might look back at some young artist, Maria Luisa. I think about incredible artists like Guadalupe Maravilla, or just other artists that inspire me right now, who are really bearing witness to the times and taking action, both through their artwork and through their social commitment. So I want to raise a glass to artists.
To young artists. Salud. Raquel?
I think I would like to toast to kind of like the spirit that Frida had during her tragedy with all of her injuries. It takes an incredible amount of patience and determination to push through something like that. And I think we can all find some inspiration to have those kind of qualities within ourselves, especially in tough times like these.
Héctor, por favor.
Bueno, yo quisiera brindar por todos ustedes y por toda la gente que promueve día con día la cultura mexicana y latinoamericana en Estados Unidos, y así ayudan a facilitar la amistad y el entendimiento entre las dos regiones, Norte, Centro y Sudamérica. Salud.
Salud. Y yo quisiera brindar también por todos ustedes y que en esta noche oscura que estamos viviendo, donde parece que no llega el amanecer, es una noche de reflexión, donde el artista, la universidad, el museo tienen que reinventarse, no como un repositorio de conocimientos, sino como un agente de comprensión, de interculturalidad, de progreso, de inclusión y de diversidad. Y eso también lo vemos en la obra de Frida. Así es que salud y muchísimas gracias.